The Game Boy Advance SP is probably one of the most nostalgic and best form factors for the Game Boy Advance around, and if you've got an old one kicking around your house that's in need of a freshen up, and has a beat up old shell, a reshell can be a really great option to breathe fresh life into that old handheld of yours. Welcome back to the game room for day 1 of 12 days of Christmas. I'm stoked to be bringing you today the Prestige shell from Retro 6. I purchased these through Handheld Legends, therefore the GBA SP. I did have a couple of Game Boy Advance SPs kicking around the game room that were in desperate need of a reshell. This reshell option, we're going to go through today whether or not it's worth putting the time in, how the build quality is, whether or not it's something that you should be doing to your Game Boys. Let's get into it right now. Alright, let's crack into day 1's package, and inside today I picked up 4 shells from Handheld Legend. I had purchased some things from Handheld Legend before, and I really like their customer service, and dealing with them is super easy. These shells from Retro 6 are $19 US, and actually comes with pretty much everything you're going to need to do a full shell swap over, whether or not you've got an AGS 101 model, which is the frontlit, or the AGS 101, which is the backlit model. Okay, getting right into it, let's talk really quickly about the build. This video is not going to go super in-depth into the process of reshelling your Game Boy Advance SP. There are tons of videos on YouTube that you can search up. I did during my rebuild process, so I just want to touch on some of the issues that I ran into when I was rebuilding my Game Boy Advance SPs. Is this build beginner friendly? Yeah, it probably ranks somewhere right between beginner and intermediate. There isn't any soldering involved in reshelling a Game Boy Advance SP. It's mainly just 2 screwdrivers and maybe a pair of tweezers if you need them, but go slowly. Taking your time and not rushing through this is gonna be your best friend through this whole process. Make sure you keep track of where all the screws go that you pulled out of the original Game Boy. That is definitely a really good tip, not misplacing screws or putting screws into the holes that they didn't come out of. Take photos or run a video while you're doing the whole process of reshelling. You can go back and take a look through the video to see how things came apart so that you know how to put them back together. The hinges are probably one of the toughest parts of this. There are videos going to outline how to pull out and put back in the hinges, but they do take quite a lot of force, and lining them back up when you stick them back in is something that you really want to be aware of when you're doing this one. I will mention that the Handheld Legend website says that you should buy aftermarket hinges for aftermarket shells. I didn't have any issue with the OEM hinges. I stuck them right back into the reshell and I had no problems at all. If you're doing any research on reshelling Game Boys and Retro 6, you're going to probably find some drama surrounding Retro 6 and some stuff about how they may have stole their molds for making the plastic forms from other companies. I'm not here to kind of weigh in on that topic at all, but buy who you want to buy from and support whatever company you want to support. I happen to always buy through Handheld Legend when I'm looking for this kind of stuff, and Retro 6 just happened to be what they had. So buy from whoever you want and try out different shells. You may find one that you like better than another. Alright, let's talk about whether or not this is worth it. Well, right out the gate, having a beat-up old Game Boy Advance SP like the one I had, it's chewed up, it's looks like a dog kind of got a hold of it for a while, and it's scratched all to pieces. Yeah, right away, is it worth it? Absolutely. If you've got a completely destroyed Game Boy Advance SP and you don't have an original shell to replace it with, this is a really great option, and you should definitely look into reshelling. One of the things that I came across a lot about reshelling was how the plastic feels. And yeah, the plastic's not going to be exactly the same. So if that's going to be something that's going to bother you, maybe try to find a pristine shell that's from Nintendo to replace it with, because they do not feel the same. The Nintendo shells, the plastic feels slightly harder, and these replacement shells have a bit of a satiny feel to them that is not like the original shells. So if that's something that's going to bother you, these might not be for you. Let's talk a little bit about the hinges, because that's something that came up a lot. I've used the original hinges in these new reshells, and they don't feel exactly like they did in the original Nintendo. When you first put them in, they took almost like a little bit of a breaking in process. They don't quite snap exactly like they did originally, and if you're one of those weirdos who likes to play with your Game Boy Advance snapped all the way forward and almost hyperextended, the reshells don't really do that in quite as snappy of a way as the original ones did. It's similar, but it doesn't feel exactly the same. The other thing about the hinges that I saw a lot was some posts about how they don't exactly sit exactly the way that the original ones did. They will if you press them closed, but a regular, normal Nintendo Game Boy kind of snaps closed, and they don't really do that once they're reshelled, so you'll have to give it a little squeeze if you want it completely closed. If that's something that's going to bother you, you might not want to go with a reshell. Now, I don't know if the aftermarket hinges would solve that problem, so maybe that's something to look into in the future, and if you know, maybe you can comment down below. But yeah, the hinges don't function exactly like they did in the original shell. Another thing I encountered a lot in forums about these aftermarket shells is people who have pulled them apart multiple times. I got these buttoned up and put together in one shot, and when I did that, I did not pull them back apart again. The holes that the screws go into are not pre-threaded on the aftermarket shells. Now, I didn't pull them apart a second time, but if you were to pull this Game Boy apart again, I'm not sure how many times you could re-thread that screw in without stripping the hole out, but I did read many posts about people who stripped the holes after pulling it apart multiple times. At the end of the day, this is a DIY project, so you're going to come away with some errors, and a lot of those are going to be build errors that are your fault, not the people who manufactured these shells. I, for example, used the wrong screws on the front and pushed longer screws through the top plate on my nice black GBASP. It's the only flaw besides the power switch on this one. You know, it's something that I'm stuck with now. Unless I want to go and spend another 19 USD and fix that, I'm just going to have to deal with those subtle imperfections. That's okay with me. This still is a great playing AGS 101, but if something like that's going to bother you, maybe buy 2 shells so that you can have a practice run at it first. At the end of the day, would I recommend reshelling your Game Boy Advance SP? Absolutely, especially if you've got an old shoot-up one. The job is not that hard to do. Take your time, go slow. You're going to have an amazing looking GBASP at the end of the day. Buy from whatever company you want to buy from. I'm not necessarily saying Retro 6 is the best, but these do look very cool. I like the feel, and I'm happy with how these came together. A really neat way to breathe some new life into your Game Boy Advance SP. Happy first day of Christmas. I'm gonna leave a little bit of content here for you, showing you my buddy Tom, who I actually rebuilt this one for, receiving it. I put this one together, I hope that he likes it. We're gonna play some Pokemon on these ones. So yeah, see you tomorrow for day 2 of 12 Days of Christmas. Thanks for watching.
No way. Lime green. Dude.